Most people think the Bible tells Christians not to judge anyone, but Paul actually says something very different. This morning in my men's Bible study, we were reading 1 Corinthians 5, and something stood out to me that I think a lot of people misunderstand. The passage talks about a man in the church who is sleeping with his father's wife, and Paul tells the church to remove the man from fellowship. At first glance, that can sound incredibly harsh, and I remember reading that passage years ago and wondering if the man was just permanently rejected. But when you keep reading scripture, that's not actually how the story ends. What Paul was really addressing wasn't just the man's behavior, he was addressing the church. The church had allowed something destructive to continue without confronting it. Instead of grieving the situation, they were tolerating it. So Paul instructs them to remove the man from fellowship, not as punishment for punishment's sake, but as correction. In fact, Paul says the purpose is so that the man's spirit may ultimately be saved. And later in 2 Corinthians, Paul appears to reference that same situation again. And this time his instruction is completely different. He tells the church the discipline has been enough. Now they should forgive the man and reaffirm their love for him, which strongly suggests something happened in between. The man repented. So what looked like rejection was actually part of a process that led to restoration. And that stood out to me today. Sometimes we think scripture is as simple as black and white when we first read it. But the more we study it, the more we realize it requires humility and patience to understand what's really happening. Interestingly, later in the day, I ran into something very similar, just in a completely different area of life. I spent time working through a report that had been prepared for me at the mastermind I attended this week. Some things in my strategy that I thought were completely settled suddenly didn't look quite as black and white anymore. Not wrong, just incomplete. There were adjustments I could make that actually might accelerate the results. But those adjustments require the same thing Scripture often requires: humility, a willingness to admit that there might still be more to learn. And when that happens, behavior starts to change. And when behavior changes, outcome starts to change too. Today felt like one of those days, a shift in understanding, a shift in direction, which makes it a really good day, one day better.